I am very pleased to present Savannah Martin. I met Savannah this last year. I had called her office in Garland, Texas, because we were expanding what we were doing with the webinars for UEMA. And it was interesting because as I watched the news, I continued to see things happening in Garland. And, you know, here in the state of Utah, we occasionally get the opportunity to spin up our EOC, but imagine spinning up your EOC over a dozen times in 18 months for things like terrorist attacks and F4 tornadoes and 100-year floods. And so I spoke with Savannah, and I was intrigued with what she had to share with her experience and knowledge in the field of emergency management. I was also pleased to sit in her class at the conference in Savannah, Georgia for the International Association of Emergency Managers. So Savannah Martin is the Senior Emergency Management Specialist for the City of Garland, Texas. And I have just been informed that she has now received a promotion, moving to a different office there in Garland, so congratulations. Savannah Martin is a Senior Emergency Management Specialist. She started her time at the City of Garland almost 5 years ago as an unpaid intern while in graduate school. And since joining the Garland Office of Emergency Management, Savannah has served in both the command and general staff positions in the Emergency Operations Center during 2 presidentially declared disasters. Also, while obtaining her undergraduate and graduate studies, Savannah's main areas of study were concentrated in national security and public administration. She has an MS from University of North Texas. And so without further ado, Savannah Martin.
All right, thank you so much for inviting me here out to Utah. When I left Dallas on Tuesday evening, it was 80 degrees. And then I got here and it's super cold. So I'm going to go over some of the big events that we've had over the past year and a half in Garland, Texas, and touch on some lessons learned from each of those events, and then go over like collective lessons learned. I should say this is my own opinions, and I try to be as honest as possible when I'm talking to you folks. At the end, I'll also can answer questions as well. So show of hands, how many people have been to Texas? Oh, wow. What about the Dallas area? Okay, so y'all know all about Texas. Well, Garland, Texas has a population of almost 226,000. I think it's closer to 230,000. We cover 57.1 square miles. We're the 12th largest city in Texas and the 87th largest in the nation. However, when we sit next to Dallas, it's pretty easy to feel small and forgotten. In Dallas County, there are 7 cities with a population of 100,000 plus. So it's a big metropolitan area. Despite our relatively large size in Garland, we pride ourselves of being like a small town, a great place to raise our family. We're a manufacturing hub. That's where most of our jobs are in the manufacturing side. And we're the largest manufacturing hub in Dallas County. Also, something to note, Texas is a home rule state. We generally have weaker counties than some of the other states. And then for our health department, the city of Garland has their own health department. We're independent from Dallas County. And our school district also covers the neighboring cities of Rowlett and Saxe. So our health department also covers those 2 cities as well. So when we're planning for health type events, we're working in conjunction with the 2 cities that our health authority covers. So emergency management is different wherever you go. The principles are the same, but what we actually do is different versus the county, the state, the local jurisdiction. So some of the day-to-day things that we do in the Garland Office of Emergency Management is we maintain our city's warning siren system. Common misnomer is tornado sirens. We have a lot of tornadoes and severe weather in North Texas, North Central Texas. So we're testing our sirens monthly and educating the public on what it means when you hear a siren. We also develop relationships with internal and external partners on a daily basis, including our community-based organizations in Garland and then our VOAD partners at the county. We're also preparing the public on how to take care of themselves and their family before, during, and after a disaster. And we do this through multiple public education events throughout the year. We manage the city's Emergency Operations Center. The bottom picture is what our EOC looks like when it's not activated. It's not as fancy as, say, like Dallas or Fort Worth, but it does the trick. And at the same time, we're developing and maintaining our emergency operations plans in compliance with state and federal regulations. And this is what I have the most experience with, is managing the Homeland Security Grant Program. The Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington area is a UOSI, so we do get UOSI and state Homeland Security funding. And what we're doing is we're enhancing the equipment and the capabilities of our regional response teams. So the City of Garland has a FEMA Type 1 bomb and SWAT and hazmat team. An interesting fact is our folks it's not their full-time job, SWAT or bomb. They just do it on the side because they want to. They don't get any extra money for it. And then on our bomb team, we're one of the only teams in the state that have our tactical bomb technicians integrated into the SWAT team, which was a new requirement, and we have 3 bomb techs tactical bomb techs that integrate with SWAT. We also cover about 30 jurisdictions and counties to our east, all the way to Louisiana and Arkansas for those special response teams. And then to note about our staffing, I was in a session yesterday, and the education session, they were mentioning that a lot of the places here is a one-man shop. So in Texas, that's true too, especially in those rural areas. However, in the Metroplex, we're very resource-rich in emergency management. So my office is an office of 3. We used to be an office of 5, but because we rely on that grant funding, we've had to downgrade our staff a little bit. During the tornado, there was only 2 of us. One person got a lot of experience and then got a job in Delaware, being their public assistance coordinator. So average in the Metroplex is usually 2 to 3 folks. I think the city of Dallas has about 15 people, and Fort Worth has about 15 people as well. So hazards are unique and different in all the places you go to. Hold on. I'm not good with technology, sorry. Listed are the main hazards that we're planning for in the city of Garland. We're in the process of reviewing our 5-year hazard mitigation action plan that we're going to submit to FEMA hopefully by this summer. We've added in some new hazards that we didn't have before. We were just doing natural hazards. We included man-made as well. Obviously, we've had a lot of experience with tornadoes, severe winter weather. Last weekend, it was about 19 degrees in Dallas, and it snowed a little bit, less than what it is snowing right now, and the entire Metroplex just shut down. It was traffic. You know, my commute is usually 25 minutes. It took me an hour and a half to get home. So there's a joke that if you spill a cup of ice on a road in the Metroplex, the whole place will shut down, because we're just not good drivers in the winter weather. Drought is pretty much a standard in north central Texas and Texas in general. Terrorism, extreme heat. In the summer, it gets up to 115 degrees. Earthquakes is something relatively new to north central Texas. We've never really had to deal with earthquakes before, but due to recent things such as possibly fracking, we've had to prepare for them, especially our neighbors to our west in Irving, Texas. They've had a lot of earthquakes recently that have been felt in Garland, and then our neighbors to the north in Oklahoma. And then severe thunderstorms happens all the time. Spring is when it happens most common, but we also have what we call a second spring, and that's around October and November, where we have more chances of severe weather with straight line winds and tornadoes. So this is a snapshot of what we've been dealing with in Garland since 2011. We've had some, one state-level disaster declared. We've had, I think, 2 public health emergencies declared, Ebola and West Nile virus, since 2011. And we've had 2 presidentially declared disasters. That's the May 29th flooding and the EF4 tornado in December. We obviously had an event of national significance, the terrorist shooting on May 3rd. And in between all these things going on, we had windstorms, severe weather, a couple of winter storms. So we've been pretty busy. I started as an intern in the Office of Emergency Management right after the Super Bowl ice storms in 2011. And it looks like ever since I've been there, we've had all different kinds of events. So maybe I'm that black cloud that hangs over my office, I'm not sure. But it's safe to say that I've had a very fulfilled career in emergency management. I am relatively young. I went to, right after high school, I went to college. Right after college, I went to grad school. And I started interning my last year of grad school. So since then, this is all my experience and what I've been dealing with. So now to talk about some of the events that actually happened. May 3rd, this was our biggest event that we had in a very long time. It was a terrorist shooting at the Garland Independent School District Curtis Colwell Center. So this is a picture of what the Curtis Colwell Center looks like. Like I said, it's owned by the school district, which is a special district. So it's really big. We host the city will host graduations there, basketball tournaments, weddings, anything, you name it, you can book the Curtis Colwell Center through GISD. So on Sunday, May 3rd, a Draw the Profit event took place at the Curtis Colwell Center. The event was hosted by the American Freedom Defense Initiative, which is spearheaded by Pamela Geller. You might see her in the news a lot. And it offered a $10,000 reward for the winning cartoon of Muhammad. And if you don't know, it's bad to draw Muhammad. It's against the Islam religion. So the keynote speaker was someone named Geert Wilders, who's a Dutch lawmaker. And Pamela Geller and Geert Wilders are on the ISIS hit list. So we had some VIPs in the area. Prior to this event, there was a Stand with the Prophet and Honor and Respect conference held at the center in January of that year. And the conference was a fundraiser to support the building of a center dedicated to teaching Muslims how to combat negative depictions of their faith. This event was protested by thousands of people. And when I say thousands, I mean we had 3,000 protesters outside the Curtis Colwell Center on both sides of the spectrum. You know, they didn't think that the school district should have allowed this Islam conference to take place. And then you had people protesting those protesters. And they were really mean. This was a law enforcement event in January as well. People were grilling bacon and pork on the grill, so as the participants would walk in, they would get the waft of the pork smell. They were drawing Muhammad on parking places, so you know, if the participants wanted to park, they had to park on top of the Prophet Muhammad. So it's really terrible of mankind, you know, to do things like this. So in the week leading up to the Draw the Prophet event, the FBI had issued a bulletin suggesting that the event could entice some to commit violence, but the primary focus was abroad, not in Texas. But because the event was attracting media and the bulletin was issued, the Office of Emergency Management staff chose to monitor conditions at the EOC. We don't really have a lot of special events in the city of Garland, so we really don't have special event planning. That's something that we had recently just started in the past 3 months, that we started planning for special events. But compared to Dallas and Arlington and Fort Worth, you know, the events that we have don't really draw big crowds. So just as the evening was wrapping up, OEM received a call from our counterparts at the center saying that they were going to they were fixing to dismiss everybody. And not 2 minutes later, we heard over the radio shots fired and that it was an officer-involved shooting. So at that point is when we spun up the EOC and people started reporting in. So what happened was 2 men wearing body armor and equipped with assault rifles and handguns and ammunition opened fire on a parked police vehicle that was outside a barricade of the Curtis Colwell Center. They shot a GISD security officer who was unarmed, shot him in the ankle, and later the suspects were eventually fatally shot by a local Garland police officer. So this right here, this picture at the bottom is one of our SWAT team members. This was the cartoons of Muhammad that were in the art contest. So this was a unique event to the city. For starters, it was a true law enforcement event. All the events that we had up to this point were kind of like storms, and that involves everybody. This, however, was entirely different. It was also being streamed and broadcasted online. So I was watching it in the EOC, so as soon as the shots were fired, you can see people running and screaming, and then it just cuts off online. And there were national news media outlets everywhere. They were inside the event center, they were outside the event center. So we had never had an event where media was embedded inside where we need to evacuate people. We had to evacuate witnesses. There were about 250 folks that attended this event. None of them lived in Garland. Most of them weren't even from Texas. They had just come to this event. So since we didn't have any prior special event planning, we weren't sure where are we going to take these 250 witnesses that need to be questioned now by local law enforcement and the FBI. So we thought about opening schools. Well, then we don't want to send those people to schools. And a decision was made actually outside of the EOC, at the command post, to send them over to our fire administration building. We have two or three very large rooms where these folks could stay. However, the fire administration building also hosts the emergency operations center and all the city servers. So in hindsight, we wouldn't have we wouldn't have sent witnesses there. We didn't know who was embedded in those witnesses. You can see this, this bottom picture shows our SWAT guys with folks just putting, filming them and taking pictures of them, have the cameras in their faces. And that's what it was like. We used our school buses to get to the fire admin building, but there was media inside filming everything. Also for press conferences and public perception, and this is my own opinion, and we've talked about it, and we did a better job in future events after this, but our police PIO, Joe Harn, he's a very respected man in the community. He had been there I think he worked for the city for like 35 years. So he's used to handling all media requests, him and the chief. And that's how it was. They did a good job of answering all media questions and following up with folks. However, if you look at events after this, say like the Orlando shooting at the Pulse nightclub, when you see the city giving a press conference, there's your uniformed personnel, you have your mayor or your city manager, you have your state officials, your federal officials, your partnering agencies like the FBI, and it kind of gives, that it shows that there's a united front. And that's something that we didn't necessarily do very good during this event, but that we have gotten better at, over the course of the year with the other events that we had. And then in the EOC, we were mainly doing logistics for this event, mainly witness reunification to their cars. So their cars were parked at this parking lot, but there's a whole mile radius that was shut down, so they couldn't get to their cars the next day. And like I said, most of them were from out of town or out of state. So we worked with the local Holiday Inn Express to get them some rooms at a better rate. And And then we sign them up through our Code Red system, which is like a reverse 911. So when the crime scene opened back up, then we launched that call to contact all of them, and then we arranged shuttle transportation to get them from the hotel to the special event center. So in the weeks following the shooting, it was raining a lot. And it rained and it rained. It was heating back up. You know, the picture at the top right is of the Omni Hotel where it has rain and it's marked out. The Omni in downtown Dallas is known to put, you know, little witty signs. So it's just funny that, you know, it was raining everywhere. The whole state was flooded. And Garland, we got over 7 inches of rain in the north part of the city in just a few short hours. The north part of Garland has had a lot of development recently, and especially in the cities north of Garland. So the drainage channels have kind of changed as the landscape has changed. Our golf course was flooded, and the golf course alone, it's a municipal golf course, it was $1.5 million in damage. And then homes in the southern part of the city were also flooded. The EOC was eventually activated for a resource request, and that was a rescue helicopter. That's not something that the city of Garland owns. We don't just have helicopters hanging out and, you know, in the bays. So it was a resource that we had to request through the county, and then it went up to the state. So our Texas DPS helicopter had to come and rescue actually a police officer from a neighboring jurisdiction that had been monitoring a flood-prone area, and the water just was too rapid, and he got swept away. Collectively, the flood damage to public infrastructure and the homes throughout Dallas County was so significant that it actually met the thresholds for a governor and a presidentially declared disaster. This cleared the way for federal funds to be made available to individuals and to the local jurisdictions. And like I said, during this time, not only was Dallas County flooded, the entire state of Texas was essentially flooded, especially in East Texas and down into Houston. So we received about $5.2 million in public infrastructure damage, and nearly 300 residential and commercial homes were impacted. Today, we're still in the process of collecting all that money from FEMA for our reimbursement. So this was the first time that Garland was granted a state and presidentially declared disaster. Prior to this, what my office knew about individual and public assistance was what we had learned in classes, you know, in the FEMA classes. We didn't really have experience with it. And something that we found, especially during the tornado, is recovery is like the last thing on your mind. It's not as appealing and fancy as, you know, the actual response phase. So recovery kind of gets neglected, and that's what we fell victim to. In Dallas County, the public assistance and individual assistance threshold is $8.5 million in public infrastructure damage, and then just a handful of homes. I think it's like maybe 5 homes. However, for the state of Texas, it's $36.5 million in public infrastructure damage, and 800 homes with little major damage to destroyed with little insurance. So basically uninsured losses. For this event, because a lot of people don't have flood insurance, we were able to meet that threshold, and because it impacted the entire state. It was a different story during the tornado, which I'll touch on. So what we found in this event was most people do not have flood insurance unless they live in a floodplain. And even then, if you pay off your mortgage, you're not required to keep that insurance. And the homes that were flooded were in an older part of Garland. It was one-owner homes, meaning the owner had lived there their whole lives. They've paid off their mortgage several years ago, and they didn't carry the insurance anymore. So that's where we ran into some problems with public perception and telling them how the process is. You know, they want to know why can't they get all this money? Why did they have to have the flood insurance? And they were expecting a lot more than what they were given. A lot of times people think that FEMA is just gonna, if you get a disaster declaration, FEMA is gonna come and just throw out money and make it rain. And that's really not the case at all. There's a process, and so that's really what took the most time, is just educating the public on what that reimbursement process was like. So takeaways, my personal takeaways for this were damage assessments, dress appropriately. So this happened in May. It's hot. It's probably about 85, 90 degrees. I'm out there with FEMA and the state, and I'm in my professional dress clothes and flats and nice pants. And that was the worst decision I've probably ever made, and it's completely uncomfortable. After that, I went and bought some tactical pants and tactical boots for the next time I ever had to do this. Also, things like this attract media and local officials. So actually, one of our council members' houses had been flooded. So that our county judge, Judge Jenkins, came out to meet with the council member. It was this big thing all over the media. Then here's me right here in the back. Here's the county judge, and I'm giving like this stink face. So something I also learned was watch your facials when media is around. So I definitely didn't do that the next time. You don't want those pictures circulating around, like who's this girl making this ugly face? So this brings us to the ugly, December 26, 2015. The forecast that day mentioned heavy rain. This fueled our fears for flooding. Like I said, we had just had that flooding in May. Actually, exactly 1 month prior to this, on Black Friday, we had some more flooding in the north part of the city, and we had a flood fatality associated with that. It was a young father was on his way to Target to work at Black Friday. Since then, the city has put up some barricades, 12 barricades throughout that flood-prone region. So when the Weather Service tells us it's going to rain and it's going to rain a lot, that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about flooding. One of the first forecasts actually mentioned a wintry mix, and like I said earlier, the entire Metroplex shuts down with the slightest amount of ice or snow on the ground. It was also a holiday. This was a weekend and a city holiday, so a lot of our folks were not at work. They were out of town. But at 6:39, a tornado warning was issued for the city of Garland. This was actually the second tornado warning that was issued within that hour. At 6:48, we had a train spotter report that a funnel was forming under a wall cloud, and it would be touching down in the city of Sunnyvale, which is our partner directly south of us. So we all plan and we train and we prepare for this day and a big event like this. And then we pray that it never comes, right? So this was pretty much a worst case scenario. It was nighttime. It was a holiday. The tornado was striking a very populated area in the city of Garland, and it was right alongside a highway overpass and interchange. So even just thinking about that day is, it kind of takes my breath away of the magnitude of this event. The bottom picture is the EOC. We were activated within really like 30 to 45 minutes of the tornado hitting. And then the top right is a part of the apartment complex. So it hit this giant apartment complex, and some of the buildings were completely gone. It was just slabs left. So it was crazy. Personal reflection, going into work that evening, I was the backup. At this point in time, we only had 2 members of the Office of Emergency Management. It was me and then my boss, the Emergency Management Coordinator. But an event like this is all hands on deck, so I had to be there. I live east of Garland, about 25 miles east. So coming into Garland on the highway, that's where the tornado hit. It was shut down. The city of Rockwall had blocked it off. So I had to go an alternate way. My alternate way was blocked off, and I had to get police escort in through 2 other cities to make it to Garland. And I'll never forget, it was something like a movie, the smell of gas and the bursted pipes, and then the pine trees, because this is the day after Christmas. and everyone had, Christmas trees. So it was just something that you can never really forget. The next morning, the National Weather Service survey team rated the Garland tornado an EF4 based on the amount of damage that it caused. And to give you a little perspective, EF4 tornadoes account for less than 1% of tornadoes annually, and they have wind speeds of 166 to 200 miles per hour. And in total, in north central Texas, there were 12 tornadoes that evening. So this was just one of the 12 that impacted the Metroplex. We had approximately 527 buildings impacted with varying degrees of damage. 527 might seem like a low number until you realize that buildings include single-family homes, commercial properties, churches, and apartment buildings, not those individual apartment units. Obviously, in the apartments, there were several families living in each building. So nearly 300 of these properties sustained major damage, or they were completely destroyed. There was nothing but slabs left. We found that for this event, we really had to focus on dwelling units since it did impact an apartment complex rather than actual building numbers. So including the building units from the apartments, we had nearly 1,200 dwelling units impacted, single-family home and apartment units. 415 of those dwelling units had enough damage to make the dwelling uninhabitable. So this essentially means that 415 families were homeless after December 26th, the day after Christmas. And then there were 9 fatalities in Garland due to this tornado. All fatalities took place on the Interstate 30 and President George Bush Turnpike. It's a major overpass in the area. Fortunately, no one who sought shelter in a sturdy structure lost their lives. All the fatalities took place on the highway. And that's amazing that there weren't any more lives lost because going through the damage assessments and looking at these pictures don't really do it justice. It's just a miracle how people survived this event. I mean, when your home is left to nothing but a slab, and then, oddly enough, the bathroom that you were hiding in, there were so many cases like that. So because there were 415 families that were without homes, that evening we had opened up a shelter. Lesson learned for us is we have agreements with the American Red Cross to come handle shelter operations for us. But this was the day after a holiday, and they had a lot of volunteers out of time too. So the city had to sustain the operations for at least 36 hours before the volunteers could get there. That's not something that we had necessarily trained or prepared for. Before this, we're thinking if we're going to open up a shelter, the Red Cross is going to be there within an hour or two. And that's not how it worked. So the shelter was in one of our parks and rec centers, and our park staff had to staff that shelter until the Red Cross could get there. We had a mobile shower unit that came because we don't have showers at any of our shelters. And then we also were able to transport people to a local gym that offered shower facilities as well. And then on the debris clearance side, our plan was pretty simple. We're going to pick up this debris, and we're going to pick it up fast. And like many of you, our debris management plan was developed based on best practices and outlined how we would organize and begin collecting debris immediately after the event. Knowing that the debris clearance is labor intensive, we have several contracts for debris pickup. However, the city was going to do that monitoring aspect of the debris collection. We were going to use our code compliance staff and our environmental waste services staff to monitor that debris. However, the problem was when our streets department was clearing the roadways for those first responders, they found that the debris was made up of memories. These are people's Christmas presents, their wedding pictures, their kids' favorite toys, and they just didn't feel right picking it all up and taking it to a temporary debris site. So what we ended up doing was we gave the residents 72 hours, and we handed out large trash bags, and we told them, get as much stuff as you can salvage, and put it in these bags, and if you need more bags, let us know. And then after 72 hours is when we began the debris clearance operations. We ended up saving a lot more money by going with a contractor for both the monitoring and the debris clearance piece. Like I said, Garland's 57.1 square miles, but this only impacted 1.8 square miles of the city. So we had to worry about getting vital services to the rest of the 99% of the folks in the city. Thousands of people are going to wake up the next morning and want their holiday trash picked up. And we also did something unique that wasn't in our plans at all, that we did something on the fly, and that was a disaster recovery center. So there's a lot of folks that needed immediate help. So 3 days after the tornado, we opened up this regional assistance center. Like I mentioned, there was 12 tornadoes, so it just didn't impact Garland. But Garland was the hub for this center. It had 3 parts: a volunteer reception center, something y'all are probably familiar with, a MARC, a multi-agency resource center. And then we had an area for donations management. And this was all in a rec center. So the volunteer reception center, people that wanted to volunteer could come to this center, and they would collect work orders. Operation Blessing, I don't know if y'all have ever been able to work with them, but they're really great. They handled all of that volunteer reception piece for us in those work orders. At the MARC is where we had over 30 different agencies. It was in the gym, and they were offering vital things that people needed right away. Some things that people forgot, everyone adhered to the warnings and went and sought shelter, but they didn't take their purses or their wallets with them. They didn't take shoes. So a lot of people didn't have shoes, and we had San Antonio Shoe Company come out to the center, and they donated over 3,000 pairs of shoes and 3,000 pairs of socks to those that needed it. As I mentioned, a lot of people didn't take their wallets or their purses, so we worked with our partners at the Texas Department of Public Safety, and they brought in their driver's license disaster response unit. And they basically set up their computer and the machine to print off those driver's licenses for folks, because they need that to have some kind of identification. We kind of worked this. We treated this as like its own incident command post. So we had a command center there, and actually like the gym part of the recreation center. So the bottom picture just shows people set up shop. They had their maps on the mirrors, and they were sending daily reports to the EOC. And then another unique thing that we did was our mobile building permit office. With the amount of damage that we had, there was a lot of people that were going to have to pull permits. Well, a lot of these folks also lost their transportation. So what our building inspection folks did was, once the initial response and the search and rescue operations ended, they converted the Garland Fire Department mobile command center to a mobile building permit office. This is something we didn't plan for. It just seemed like a good idea, and it ended up working out great. It doubled as an information kiosk for folks. So at the EOC, we were making sure that the folks at this building permit office had all the information they needed and handouts. And then our building inspection guys think that they had less permit violations because they are right in the middle of the hardest hit area. So you've probably done some donations management courses or have some experience with donations. We plan for it. We have a donations and volunteer management annex. Wasn't that great when we actually had to implement the plan. We were going to have to do a complete overhaul of it because of some of the lessons learned some of the lessons that we learned. For starters, we had donations being sent to the shelter. So the shelter guests that needed some things, that's what this bottom left picture is. So they got a lot more stuff than they really needed. And then the top right is our little donations management warehouse thing that had been set up and was operated by Adventist Community Services. And then we had the donations that we said we didn't want. So we had put out in way possible for public information that we weren't collecting used clothing. So what did people bring? They brought used clothing. And that's something we had to think about. What do you do if a very large and popular national organization shows up with pallets of used clothing? Do you turn them away and say, sorry, we can't accept that? In hindsight, we probably should have done that, but what we did was we took it. We had a local church that managed the used clothes donations, and in the end, if people didn't take them, they donated it to a homeless ministry. But that's something that even if you put out there that you're not going to take certain donations, they're going to come anyways, and they're going to come in masses and pallets, and it's like a mountain of clothes. Volunteer access. We wanted to track volunteer hours for our in-kind match for the disaster declaration. However, most of the work was done on private property, and it was just an overwhelming amount of volunteers and volunteer organizations wanting to come to help. So what we did, we didn't vet them. We just opened the floodgates essentially and let them set up in the middle of the impact area, and they kind of organized themselves. We told them that if we did get reports of any violations, if they weren't being kind or friendly to the residents, that the police would remove them. And we kept a heavy police presence in this area. There was probably a police officer on every street of the impacted area. So, initially our plan was to credential all these organizations, see who they were, what services they provide, did we really need it? But in the end, we didn't. We just let them go, and that was actually a really good decision. It could have been really bad, but we had no problems at all. The downside is that we don't know how many volunteers came and helped inside that impact area. We couldn't track their hours, and we didn't have a way to thank them because we didn't know of all the folks that came. Lessons learned from this disaster recovery center is don't put all three together. It's a logistical nightmare. Having the volunteer reception center at the same place where impacted residents are coming to get vital services, it didn't match very well. Also, those volunteers took up a lot of parking places. So we ended up having to use a neighboring high school parking lot and do another shuttle service from the high school to the rec center. So next time we'd completely put that probably in another part of the city. Same with the donations. We wouldn't have a donations area where you could drop off donations and pick up donations at the same place. It was kind of a hassle. There was less room for putting the donations out that people really needed. So next time we'll store our donations somewhere else where people can drop them off. We also used a service called recovers.org. It was actually donated to us about 3 hours after the tornado hit. I had developed a good relationship with Katria and Morgan O'Neill, who designed and who operates Recovers. So they donated this system to us. It worked really well for us. It was a way for, if people called or sent an email, where can I sign up to help, or how do I know what kind of donations you need, we could send them to the recovers.org website. And we had a human services branch in the EOC, and one of their jobs was just to manage that website. It was a great tool. It does take a little bit of training and to be familiar with it, but we're looking at using it, henceforth, and getting price quotes, and because like I said, it was donated. But it was a great place to send people. So this is where the city is at, a year later. These numbers are as of December 26, 2016. We're in the process of requesting the reimbursement from FEMA for the tornado event in the amount of $1.6 million. We did the PA pilot program, so we'll get 80% back on that, whereas the rest is 75%. We had a long-term recovery committee. Again, that was something that we didn't plan for very well. So it took a couple of days to get that together with our VOAD partners and our community-based organizations. There was no individual assistance granted for this disaster. Most of the homes had some insurance. There wasn't enough uninsured losses. Also, underinsured is really hard to prove as well. So the only thing that services these people could get were whatever local nonprofits were helping, and then the SBA loan process. So our long-term recovery committee has served 113 cases so far. The cases that are pending are folks that had done the initial setup of cases, but then just never called back or sent in the proper insurance information that they needed. And then reconstruction efforts, this is something I'm pretty proud of. 80% of the homes have attained the necessary permits for reconstruction. And then 70% of those homes that were impacted are already reoccupied. The day, December 27th, the morning I went out there to, going out there last week, it looks completely different. You would hardly notice that a tornado went through the area. It's really amazing what our code compliance and our building inspection folks have been able to accomplish, and then the willingness of our residents to rebuild. Less than 3% of those structures damaged by the tornado have failed to do any work on the property. So that's about 7 properties. I think right now it's only about 4 properties. So of all those homes that were impacted, only 4 have done no work at all. That's incredible. Recovery takes years and years, and we're already way ahead of the ball game here, and it's really something I'm proud of. Insurance issues and the battles with insurance companies. Similar to the flood is people that paid off their house didn't have insurance anymore, or homeowners insurance. Also, at the time that these folks were either bought or built their house in this area of Garland, they paid about $80,000 for their house. That's how much they insured it for. Well, now to rebuild their house, it's $250,000. So they had a gap in insurance coverage. So there were the residents had to do a lot of battles with their insurance company to get some form of payment. So having 70% of those homes reoccupied, knowing about those insurance battles is amazing. And then also, the personal property is not insured unless you have that rider in your mortgage insurance. So people could rebuild their house, but they couldn't furnish their house anymore. That wasn't covered. So some takeaways from all 3 of these events is personalities in the EOC affect the success of your activation. Something that we found in all 3 activations is we have a blended ESF and ICS org chart in the EOC. And we matched people, this finance, for example, the finance section. If you did finance in your job day to day, you're going to do finance in the EOC. Same with planning. If you do something similar, you're going to do planning in the EOC. That didn't really work for us. Some people just don't have the personality and can't handle those stressful situations like other people can. So we had to do some creative maneuvering. We had to move some people out to like the Disaster Recovery Center. We called those folks our huggers. They were there with the impacted residents. They were friendly with them. They were low stress, and they were more compassionate, where in the EOC, those were our tin men. Those are the people that can work well under pressure and kind of begin with the end in mind and carry out the needed tasks that they need to do. And then we had what we called our frizzle-frazzles. Those are the people that, didn't work well in the EOC or in the Disaster Recovery Center because they can't think quickly. They do more long-term planning. So those are the folks that we assigned recovery to, and it worked out great. And then those people knew that we were moving them around because they couldn't handle the stress of the EOC. Also, ask your neighbors for help. I mentioned North Central Texas is very resource-rich in emergency management. We have a great college program at the University of North Texas for degrees in emergency management, and we have internship requirements in order to get your master's and undergrad with emergency management. So we have a plethora of people. We couldn't have done this by ourselves. There are 2 of us, and then plus our city staff of half who gone on vacation. So what we did starting with the May floods, which was around Memorial Day, we asked our neighbors for help. We said, hey, City of Mesquite, hey, City of Richardson, can you send us a body to be in the EOC to take over planning functions? Or kind of be that EOC manager that makes sure everything is staying on track. This is actually turned into something, it's a regional project. It's our EOC emergency support team. So they are formalizing themselves, and what will happen is if there is another event in Garland, we can call the emergency support team hotline, and we can get however many bodies that we need. So it's really great that the region has taken on this project. Something else, pen and paper is more reliable than modern technology. We are very fortunate in that our cell service didn't go down. All the cell phones still worked. We didn't have any technology glitches in our EOC, but it came down to people. People didn't remember their passwords to get into their computer. They didn't know how to turn on the TV. So who do they go to if they can't work the EOC? They go to emergency management. So then we're being pulled in several different directions. Then if the computer was up and then it went back down, well, what is the password to get in there? Very basic little things that you think that, we know how to do because we do it in our daily lives. You get into an emergency situation and people just can't function. They just forget those simple things. So something that we did was started practicing. We had all of our forms on paper, and all of our folks were trained to use pen and paper for the for the event. Also, the more transparent you are, the less problems you have. During the May 3rd event, we didn't share a lot of information. We only shared what needed to be shared. And because of that, we were bombarded by the media and the public with what are you doing? Just all these questions thinking maybe we weren't doing enough. So starting with the May floods and then with the tornado, we just gave out all the information. We shared it with our county folks, our state folks, our FEMA partners, our volunteers, anyone and everyone. And we had less questions that we had to answer after hours. And then also, what I think is the most important is give yourself and your staff time to detox after an activation. The past year and a half has been really rough. I think mental health is very important, and that you need to have those critical incident stress management folks come in after an EOC activation to kind of filter your staff and let your staff detox. Because of all the events that we had and then the change in staffing, we didn't have time to do that. So my advice is to make sure you take a couple days, a week, give your staff the same time so you're not burnt out and you don't have to come to work and dread coming to work because you don't know what's going to happen next. So that, I think, is really the most valuable lesson is to really work on that detox time and de-stress, and it leads to a more successful activation later. So that's all I have. So thank you so much for inviting me out here. I've really enjoyed Utah so far.